Have you ever shown kindness to a stranger and had it change everything? Maybe you're watching this from New York or California, Texas or Florida, and you can remember that one moment when compassion led you somewhere unexpected. That's what happened to me on a rainy Thursday night in Seattle, when I chose to help instead of run, and found myself pulled into a world I never imagined existed. My name is Hannah Reed, and I've been waiting tables at Marcello's for 3 years. It's the kind of upscale Italian restaurant where businessmen close deals over $1,000 bottles of wine and anniversary couples whisper across candlelight. The kind of place where you learn to read people fast, to anticipate needs before they're spoken, to move through a room like you're invisible until the exact moment you're required. At 25, I'd gotten good at it. Good enough that Marco, the owner, trusted me with the private dining rooms where the real money sat, where discretion mattered as much as impeccable service. That Thursday started like any other. The Seattle rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the city lights into watercolor smears. I'd already pulled a double shift, my feet aching in the required black heels, my white blouse somehow still crisp despite 8 hours of controlled chaos. One more party, and I could go home, help Luna with her calculus homework, collapse into bed for 5 hours before my morning shift at the coffee shop. 2 jobs kept us afloat, kept my little sister in community college, kept the lights on in our cramped apartment in Beacon Hill. It was enough. It had to be enough. The reservation book listed the party as Park, 8 people, private room 3. I'd taken their drink orders, brought out appetizers, noted the tension crackling beneath their polite conversation. They were Korean American, dressed in the kind of expensive suits that whispered old money and power. The older man at the head of the table commanded respect without saying much, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his watch probably worth more than I made in a year. His wife sat beside him, elegant in a navy dress, her English accented but flawless as she asked about the seafood. 3 younger men flanked them, brothers maybe based on the similar bone structure, and 2 women who might have been wives or girlfriends. But one chair sat empty. I'd just cleared the appetizer plates when the private room door opened and he walked in. Late, clearly, based on the way the older man's jaw tightened. The newcomer was tall, maybe 6'1", with the kind of posture that screamed military even in civilian clothes. Dark hair styled shorter on the sides, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the assembled family. He wore a black button-down and dark slacks, no tie, and something about the way he moved made my instincts ping. Controlled, coiled, like he was holding himself together through sheer force of will. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, his voice rough around the edges. Traffic was worse than expected. The older man, his father presumably, gestured to the empty chair with obvious displeasure. "We've been waiting 40 minutes, Tae-hyun. Your mother was worried." "I'm here now," Tae-hyun replied, dropping into the chair with less grace than the rest of his movements suggested. I noticed his hands, the way they gripped the armrests just a fraction too tight, knuckles pale against thin skin. I approached with my server smile firmly in place, asking if he'd like to see the drink menu. He glanced up, and for a second our eyes met. His were dark brown, almost black in the dim lighting, and haunted in a way that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days, and underneath the expensive cologne I caught the sharp edge of stressed sweat. "Just water," he said. "Thank you." His mother launched into conversation in Korean, rapid-fire words I couldn't understand but recognized as concerned based on tone. Tae-hyun responded in the same language, shorter sentences, almost clipped. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. One of the younger men, maybe mid-20s with styled hair and a more relaxed demeanor, tried to change the subject to something about shipments and schedules. Business talk, the kind that made me tune out while staying attentive to empty glasses and finished plates. I'd just returned with Tae-hyun's water when I heard it. A crash from the kitchen, loud and metallic, the unmistakable sound of someone dropping a full tray of dishes. It happened sometimes, usually with new hires, and typically resulted in some colorful Italian cursing from Chef Antonio and a thorough cleaning. I barely flinched, already calculating how long it would delay the entrees. But Tae-hyun flinched. More than flinched. His entire body went rigid, eyes going wide and unfocused. His hand shot out, knocking over the water glass I'd just set down. The sound of ice hitting the floor seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly silent room. "Taehyun?" his mother said, her voice sharp with concern. He didn't respond. He was somewhere else, his breathing rapid and shallow, chest heaving under the black shirt. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands trembled violently against the white tablecloth. Then he moved. 1 second, he was sitting, frozen in whatever nightmare held him. The next, he was on his feet, chair clattering backward, hands shoving at the table hard enough to send glasses toppling and plates sliding. Someone screamed, maybe one of the women. The youngest brother jumped up, tried to grab Taehyun's arm, and got shoved backward hard enough to slam into the wall. "Get down," Taehyun shouted, his voice raw and desperate. "Get down now. Incoming, we need to move." It wasn't English exactly, or it was English wrapped around something else, fragments of sentences that didn't quite make sense. His eyes were wild, unseeing, locked on some horror the rest of us couldn't perceive. He grabbed his father's shoulder, trying to pull the older man from his chair, and his father caught his wrists with surprising strength. "Taehyun, stop this. You're safe. You're home." But he wasn't home, not in his head. He wrenched free, stumbling backward into the sideboard hard enough to rattle the wine glasses displayed there. His mother had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The middle brother was on his phone, probably calling for help. The youngest was picking himself up from the floor, looking shaken. Security was coming. I could hear Marco's voice in the hallway, firm and commanding. The other diners would be panicking, wondering what the commotion was. This would be bad for business, bad for the restaurant's reputation, bad for my tip, and probably my job if I didn't handle it right. But looking at Taehyun Park, watching him relive something terrible and traumatic, all I could think about was Mr. Chun from the apartment below ours. Army veteran, Vietnam era, who'd had a similar episode when someone set off fireworks too close to our building. I'd been 14, terrified and unsure, but my mother had known exactly what to do. Approach slowly, speak calmly, offer a safe presence without demands. Everyone else was backing away from Taehyun. His family didn't know how to reach him. The security guys appearing in the doorway looked ready to tackle him if he made another wrong move. But I remembered Mr. Chin's daughter thanking my mother later. Remembered learning that sometimes people just needed an anchor back to reality. Someone to be gentle when their brain was convinced they were still in danger. So while everyone else retreated, I moved forward. My hands were shaking, but I kept them loose at my sides, non-threatening. I pitched my voice low and even, the same tone I used with Luna when she woke from nightmares about the car accident that killed our parents. "Taehyun," I said, using his name because names mattered, names were identity. "My name is Hannah. You're at Marcelo's restaurant in Seattle. You're safe here." He didn't respond, still caught in whatever battlefield memory held him prisoner. His back was against the wall now, hands up in a defensive position, breathing ragged. Up close I could see the scars on his knuckles, the way his pupils were blown wide with adrenaline and fear. I kept talking, one step closer, but still giving him space. "It's Thursday night," I continued, "it's raining outside. You came here with your family for dinner. Your mother is here, she's safe. Everyone is safe." His eyes flickered, just for a second, like he'd heard me through the chaos in his head. I seized on it, taking one more careful step. "You're wearing a black shirt," I said, narrating the present, grounding him in physical reality. "The walls here are burgundy. There's a painting of Venice behind you. Can you see it?" His gaze shifted slightly, not quite focusing, but moving toward the painting I'd mentioned. His breathing was still too fast, but maybe fractionally slower. I wanted to reach out, to touch his arm the way my mother had touched Mr. Chen's shoulder, but I wasn't sure if that would help or send him spiraling deeper. "Taehyun, please," his mother said softly from behind me, and the anguish in her voice made my throat tight. "Listen to your mother's voice," I suggested, keeping my own tone steady. "She's right here. You're safe with your family. Feel your feet on the floor, solid ground beneath you. You're in Seattle, not wherever your mind took you. Come back to us." Something in his eyes changed. Awareness flickered, confusion replacing the stark terror. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. His hands slowly lowered from their defensive position. He blinked rapidly, chest still heaving but the desperate edge fading from his expression. He started, his voice hoarse and uncertain. "Where?" "Marcelo's restaurant," I repeated gently. Thursday evening. You're with your family. Everything is okay now. His gaze swept the destroyed table, the spilled wine and overturned chairs, his family's worried faces, the security guards hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Reality crashed back, and I watched shame flood his features, his entire body sagging against the wall like someone had cut his strings. I'm sorry, he whispered, the words barely audible. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. I heard something, and I just... His father stepped forward, anger and concern warring on his face, but his mother was faster. She moved past me and wrapped her arms around her son, murmuring in Korean, rocking him slightly like he was still a child. He let her, closing his eyes, and I saw the wetness on his lashes that meant he was fighting tears. Marco appeared at my elbow, surveying the damage with his practiced restaurant owner assessment. Miss Reed, perhaps you should attend to the other guests, he suggested, which was polite code for get out of here before this gets messy. I nodded, backing toward the door, but not before I caught Taehyun's eyes one more time. He was watching me over his mother's shoulder, and the gratitude mixed with humiliation in his expression made my heart clench. I offered him a small smile, trying to communicate that it was okay, that I understood, that I didn't think less of him for breaking. Then I slipped out into the hallway, closing the door on the Park family's private moment of crisis. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Marco had to comp the Park family's entire meal, of course, and deal with concerned questions from other diners who'd heard the commotion. I finished my section, helped close down my station, avoided the curious looks from other servers who'd heard bits of the story. My feet ached worse than usual as I changed out of my work clothes in the staff room, pulled on my worn jacket, and prepared to face the walk to the bus stop in the rain. But when I pushed through the back door into the alley, I found Taehyun Park leaning against the brick wall, hands shoved in his pockets, looking simultaneously dangerous and lost in the sodium vapor light. I stopped short, suddenly aware that I was alone in an alley with a man who'd shown violent capability an hour ago, even if it had been unintentional. But he held up both hands in a gesture of peace, staying right where he was. I needed to apologize, he said, his voice steadier now, but still rough around the edges. For what you witnessed. For putting you in that position. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, misting around us in the glow of the streetlight. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder, studying him. Up close, without the chaos and fear, I could see he was probably in his early 30s, handsome in a sharp-edged way that spoke of discipline and control. The kind of man who turned heads, but also made people instinctively wary. Military bearing, I'd thought earlier, and up close it was even more evident. You don't need to apologize to me, I told him. I'm glad I could help. Not everyone would have, he said quietly. Most people run from that. From me, when I get like that. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the intensity in his gaze. I had a neighbor once who served in Vietnam. My mom taught me that sometimes people need patience, not distance. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. I corrected, the word automatic after 5 years. She passed when I was 20. Something shifted in his expression, recognition of shared loss maybe. I'm sorry, he said, and I believed him. My father wanted to fire you, he added abruptly. Or at least make sure you were compensated for your trouble. But I wanted to do this myself. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, extended it toward me. When I hesitated, he pressed it into my hands. I opened it and nearly dropped it in shock. There had to be $500 in cash inside, easily twice what I'd make in tips on even my best night. I can't accept this, I said immediately, trying to push it back toward him. It's too much. I was just doing what anyone decent would do. Please, he said, and the word held weight, almost desperation. Let me do this one thing. Let me give you something for your kindness, since I can't give you back the peace of mind you probably lost tonight. I bit my lip, thinking of Luna's tuition payment due next week, the electric bill I'd been juggling, the pair of shoes with soles so worn I could feel every crack in the sidewalk. Pride warred with practicality, and practicality won, the way it usually did these days. Thank you, I said softly, tucking the envelope carefully into my bag. That's very generous. He pulled out a business card next, simple black with silver text, and turned it over to write something on the back with a pen from his pocket. This is my personal number, he explained, handing it to me. If you ever need anything at all, please call me. I mean that. The front of the card read Park Security Consulting with an address downtown. I flipped it over and saw his handwriting, surprisingly neat, spelling out a phone number above the words. Thank you for your kindness when I needed it most. I looked up at him, this strange, intense man who'd crashed into my life with violence and vulnerability, and felt something shift in my chest. Something that whispered this wasn't over, that this moment mattered more than I could understand yet, that accepting his card meant accepting a connection I wasn't sure I was ready for. But I tucked it into my pocket anyway. He smiled then, just a slight curve of his lips, but it transformed his entire face, softening the harsh edges, making him look younger and infinitely more approachable. Take care of yourself, Hannah Reed, he said, my name on his lips sending an unexpected shiver down my spine. You too, Taehyun Park, I replied. Then he was walking away, disappearing around the corner toward the front of the restaurant where a sleek black car waited. I stood in the alley for a long moment after he left, rain misting my face, feeling like the world had tilted slightly on its axis and I hadn't quite found my balance yet. I had no way of knowing then that the man I'd helped through his worst moment would become my salvation through mine. That his protection would become my sanctuary, his demons would recognize my own, that the violence I'd witnessed was just the beginning of understanding the dangerous world he inhabited. I had no idea that the card burning a hole in my pocket would become my lifeline, or that the next time I saw him, I'd be the one desperately needing rescue. All I knew was that something had started that rainy Thursday night. Something that felt inevitable and terrifying and impossibly right, all at the same time. I caught my bus home, helped Luna with her homework, crawled into bed exhausted like always. But before I turned out the light, I looked at his card one more time, memorizing the number even though I had no intention of calling it. Thank you for your kindness when I needed it most. I fell asleep wondering what kind of man wrote notes like that. What kind of darkness he carried that could explode so violently. What kind of strength it took to walk back into that restaurant and face the witness to his breaking. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse I couldn't imagine, Taehyun Park was lying awake thinking about a waitress with gentle hands and a compassionate heart, who'd stepped forward when everyone else stepped back, who'd looked at his monster and chosen not to run. Neither of us knew yet that kindness would be what saved us both. The flowers arrived on Monday. I was in the middle of the lunch rush, balancing 3 plates of pasta along my left arm while refilling water glasses with my right, when Marco called me over to the host's stand. His expression was somewhere between amused and concerned, which was never a good combination on my boss. These came for you, he said, gesturing to the most extravagant bouquet I'd ever seen outside of a funeral. White peonies and pale pink roses, easily 3 dozen of them, arranged in a crystal vase that probably cost more than my rent. The card tucked among the blooms had no name, just a simple message in that same neat handwriting I'd seen on the business card. Thank you again for Thursday. I didn't need a name to know who'd sent them. My coworker Jessica materialized at my elbow, eyes wide with undisguised curiosity. Oh my God, Hannah, who's your secret admirer? Those are gorgeous. That vase alone is like $200. Easy. Just a grateful customer, I said, keeping my voice neutral even as my pulse kicked up. Marco was watching me with that knowing look that said he'd connected the dots between the flowers and Thursday night's incident. I should probably send them back, I added. It's too much. Marco shook his head. The delivery already came and went. Besides, the card says they're for you. What you do with them is your business, but they can't stay here during service. Take them to the back. So I carried the absurdly expensive flowers to the staff room, tucked the card into my apron pocket, and tried to ignore Jessica's increasingly creative theories about my love life for the rest of the shift. By the time I got home that evening, Luna had heard the whole story from my texts and was waiting with her laptop open to some article about the language of flowers. Peonies mean compassion and bashfulness, she announced, reading from the screen. Roses are gratitude and appreciation. So basically this guy is saying thank you, but he's shy about it. He's not shy, I said, thinking about the intensity in Taehyun's dark eyes, the controlled way he moved, the quiet command in his voice even when he was apologizing. He's just being polite. Luna gave me her skeptical teenage look, the one that said she was 18 and therefore knew everything about romance despite never having had a serious boyfriend. Nobody sends flowers like that just to be polite, Hannah. Those flowers are I'm interested, call me flowers. I pulled his business card from my pocket, looked at the number I'd already memorized despite telling myself I wouldn't use it. He's probably just feeling guilty about what happened, I reasoned aloud. It was an intense situation. This is closure. Then why do you still have his card? Because I haven't thrown it away yet. My sister rolled her eyes, returned to her calculus homework, and dropped the subject. But I caught her smiling when she thought I wasn't looking, and I knew the flowers had confirmed something in her romantic young mind that I wasn't ready to acknowledge in my own. The second delivery came Wednesday. This time it was chocolate, artisanal truffles from a boutique chocolatier in Pike Place Market that charged prices I'd only seen when window shopping. Again, no name, just a card that read, "I hope your week is going well." By Friday, when a book arrived, a first edition of poetry that I'd mentioned loving to a table of customers within Taehyun's earshot during that Thursday dinner. Jessica had convinced half the staff that I was secretly dating someone wealthy and mysterious. Marco pulled me aside during my break, his weathered face serious. "Miss Reed, that man from last week, the one who had the episode, he's the one sending these gifts, yes?" I nodded, seeing no point in denying what was obvious. Marco sighed, the sound of a man who'd seen too much in his decades running high-end restaurants. "The Parks are a powerful family in this city, Hannah. Powerful in ways that aren't always legal or safe. I've served them for 15 years and I mind my business because that's how you survive in this world. But you're a good girl. You work hard. You take care of your sister. I would hate to see you get mixed up in something dangerous." "He's just sending thank you gifts," I said, though even to my own ears it sounded naive. "I helped him through a difficult moment and he's grateful. That's all." "Is it?" Marco's dark eyes were kind but knowing. "Because men like that, men from families like his, they don't do anything without purpose. Just be careful, yes? Think about what you're getting into before you get too deep." I promised I would, but the truth was I'd been thinking about Taehyun Park constantly since that rainy Thursday, wondering about the scars on his knuckles and the nightmares in his eyes, wondering what had broken him so thoroughly that a dropped tray could send him spiraling into terror, wondering if the controlled, apologetic man I'd met in the alley was the real him, or if the violence I'd witnessed was always lurking beneath the surface. Saturday night, he came back. I was serving a couple celebrating their anniversary when I felt someone's gaze on me, that prickling awareness that made me look up. He was standing at the host stand talking to Marco, dressed casually this time in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. Even from across the dining room, I could see the tension in his posture, like he was forcing himself to stay still when every instinct said to move. Marco led him to a table in my section, because of course he did. When I approached with menus and my professional smile, Taehyun looked up and the intensity in his expression nearly made me stumble. "Hello, Hannah," he said quietly. "I hope you don't mind that I requested you specifically." "Not at all," I replied, proud that my voice came out steady. "Thank you for the gifts this week. They were very generous, but really not necessary. I wanted you to know I was thinking of you," he said simply, and something in my chest fluttered at the honesty. "I wanted to say that I appreciated what you did for me, and that I'd like to do something for you in return if you'd let me." I set down the menu, suddenly aware that every server in the vicinity was watching this interaction with barely disguised interest. "You don't owe me anything," I told him. "I'm glad I could help." "Have coffee with me," he said, and it wasn't quite a question, more a hope offered carefully. "After your shift. Just an hour of your time. Please." I should have said no. Marco's warning was fresh in my mind. Luna's college fund depended on me staying safe and employed, and everything about this man screamed complication. But looking at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath the control, remembering how he'd broken and let me witness it, I found myself nodding before I could think better of it. "Okay," I said. "My shift ends at 10. The smile that crossed his face was worth every warning bell going off in my head. He ordered dinner, and I served him professionally, trying to ignore how aware I was of his presence throughout the evening. Every time I passed his table, I felt his eyes tracking me, not creepy or possessive, but attentive in a way that made me hyper-conscious of every movement. When I brought his espresso after the meal, he caught my wrist gently, his touch warm and careful. "Thank you," he said, "for giving me a chance." At 10:15, I'd changed out of my work clothes into jeans and a sweater, pulled my hair out of its required bun, and met him in the parking lot where he leaned against a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. He opened the passenger door for me without asking if I wanted to drive separately, and something about the old-fashioned courtesy made me smile despite my nerves. "There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from here that stays open late," he said as we pulled into traffic. "Unless you'd prefer somewhere else." "That's fine," I replied, watching the Seattle streets blur past through rain-streaked windows. We drove in comfortable silence, which surprised me. I'd expected awkwardness or forced small talk, but instead there was just the quiet hum of the engine and the swish of wipers against glass. He parked in front of a small cafe I'd walked past 100 times but never entered, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Inside, he ordered black coffee and I got chamomile tea, and we settled into a corner booth away from the handful of other late-night customers. Up close, in the warm lighting, I could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his shoulders carried tension like a physical weight. So, I started, wrapping my hands around my mug. "Park security consulting. What does that mean exactly?" He smiled slightly, the expression rueful. "It means my family has business interests that require protection, and I'm one of the people who provides it. Bodyguard work, mostly, for executives and family members. Some consulting on security systems. Nothing too exciting on paper. But in reality," his dark eyes met mine, assessing how much truth I could handle. "In reality, my family is involved in import-export operations that aren't entirely above board. My father runs an organization that has existed in Seattle for 30 years, serving the Korean-American community and conducting business that sometimes crosses legal lines. I spent 6 years in the Army trying to be something different, something clean. When I came home, I realized I didn't have a choice about where I belonged. The honesty stunned me. Most people would have lied or deflected, but he laid it out plainly, giving me the truth I needed to make an informed decision about whether to run. "So you're in organized crime?" I said slowly, testing the words. "My family is," he corrected. "I handle security because it's the role I'm trained for, and it keeps our people safe. But yes, Hannah, if you're asking if I'm a good guy or a bad guy, the answer is complicated." I sipped my tea, processing this information against what I'd witnessed Thursday night. "And the PTSD?" I asked gently. "That's from the Army?" Something shifted in his expression, pain flickering across his features. "Afghanistan," he confirmed. 3 tours. The last one went badly. I came home 2 years ago, and I'm still fighting that war in my head sometimes. Thursday night, that crash in the kitchen, my brain heard it as an IED. I was back in Kandahar watching my unit take fire. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "That must be terrifying." "It's humiliating," he corrected quietly. "I'm a grown man who can't handle a dropped tray without losing his mind. My family doesn't know what to do with me half the time. My father thinks I'm weak. My brothers walk on eggshells around me. My mother cries every time I have an episode. You were the first person who just treated me like a human being having a hard moment instead of a problem to be solved." The raw vulnerability in his voice made my throat tight. I told him about my parents then, about the car accident 5 years ago that killed them both and left me responsible for Luna. About the nightmares I still had about getting the phone call. About survivor's guilt because I'd been at work instead of in the car with them. About how hard it was to be strong for my sister when I felt like I was drowning most days. "We're quite a pair," he said softly when I finished. "2 broken people trying to hold it together. Maybe that's not a bad thing," I replied. "Maybe broken people understand each other better." He reached across the table, covered my hand with his, and the touch sent electricity up my arm. "I would like to see you again, Hannah. Not just at the restaurant. I'd like to take you to dinner, show you parts of the city you might not have seen, spend time learning who you are beyond the professional server facade." I should have said no. Everything logical in me screamed that getting involved with a man from a crime family was asking for trouble. But looking at him, feeling the warmth of his palm against mine, I found myself wanting to say yes more than I'd wanted anything in a long time. "I need to think about it," I said honestly. "This is a lot to process. Your world, what you're offering, it's not something I can jump into without consideration." "I understand," he said, and squeezed my hand gently before releasing it. "Take all the time you need. But Hannah, please know that what I feel when I'm around you, it's not gratitude or obligation. You make me feel human again in a way I haven't in years. That's worth waiting for. We talked for another hour about safer subjects, favorite books, and childhood memories, and the best coffee in Seattle. He walked me to my bus stop after, stood with me in the drizzle until the bus arrived, and pressed a piece of paper into my hand before I boarded. My personal cell, he said, not the business line. Call me if you need anything or if you just want to talk. Day or night, I'll answer. Then the bus doors closed and I watched him standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, until we turned the corner and he disappeared from view. Luna was asleep when I got home, calculus textbook still open on her bed. I covered her with a blanket, brushed hair from her face, and thought about how everything I did was to keep her safe and give her opportunities I'd never had. Getting involved with Taehyun Park was the opposite of safe, the opposite of the careful, stable life I'd been building for us. But walking home from the bus stop, I noticed the car. It was parked across the street from our apartment building, engine running, windows tinted dark. Nothing unusual in itself except that it was the same make and model as a car I'd seen near the restaurant earlier, and when I paused at the corner to dig for my keys, I saw someone in the driver's seat watching me. My heart kicked into overdrive. I told myself I was being paranoid, that lots of people had black sedans, that this was a busy neighborhood where cars parked all the time. But my instincts screamed danger in a way they rarely did, and I found myself walking faster, keys clutched between my fingers like Marco had taught me years ago. The car pulled away from the curb and began following me. Slowly, deliberately, staying exactly 1 block behind, but matching my pace. I turned left when I should have gone straight, testing my theory, and the car turned too. My apartment was 3 blocks away, but suddenly that felt like miles. I fumbled for my phone, fingers shaking, trying to remember if I'd programmed in Taehyun's new number yet. The car accelerated. I broke into a run, my bag banging against my hip, breath coming in panicked gasps. 2 blocks. The street was empty at midnight on a Saturday. Everyone either already home or still out partying. No witnesses, no help, just me and whoever was in that car getting closer. Then another car appeared, seeming to come out of nowhere, cutting between me and my pursuer with a screech of tires. The passenger door flew open and Taehyun's voice cut through my panic. Get in now. I didn't hesitate, diving into the seat and slamming the door behind me. He accelerated hard, throwing me back against the leather, one hand reaching over to buckle my seatbelt while he drove with controlled precision through the empty streets. Behind us, the other car tried to follow, but Taehyun took a sharp right and then a left, losing them in the maze of residential roads. Are you hurt? He demanded, his voice tight, with fury barely held in check. Did they touch you? No, I managed, my whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. I just saw them following me, and I ran. He pulled into a parking garage, tires squealing on the concrete ramps as he climbed to the top level. Only when we were alone in the shadows did he finally stop, yanking the parking brake and turning to face me. His hands came up to cup my face, tilting my head so he could examine me in the dim light. You're sure you're okay? They didn't hurt you? I'm fine, I whispered, and then the terror caught up with me and I started crying, great heaving sobs that I couldn't control. He unbuckled both our seatbelts and pulled me across the console into his arms, cradling me against his chest while I fell apart. One hand stroked my hair while he murmured reassurances in a mixture of English and Korean, his heart pounding beneath my cheek. Safe, I heard him say. You're safe now. I've got you. No one's going to hurt you. When I finally calmed enough to speak, I pulled back slightly, wiping my face. How did you know? How were you there? His jaw tightened. I had someone keeping an eye on you. After Thursday, after people saw you help me, I was concerned that you might become a target. The Chong faction has been making moves against my family's interests. When my man reported a suspicious vehicle tailing you, I came immediately. Someone was watching me. The thought should have been creepy, but instead I felt grateful, protected. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have told you there might be risk associated with being seen with me. This is my fault. Who are they? I asked. The Chong faction? A rival organization, he explained, his expression grim. They've been trying to move into our territory for months. Targeting someone I clearly care about would be leverage against me and my family. I thought I had more time before they made a move this bold. The casual way he said someone I clearly care about made my pulse skip despite the circumstances. What do? I asked. Go to the police? The look he gave me was patient but pointed. The police won't help you, Hannah. This kind of conflict exists in places they don't reach. But I will protect you. You and your sister both. If you let me. I thought about Luna asleep in our apartment, vulnerable and unaware of the danger that had just shown up in our lives. Thought about the car following me, the intent obvious even if I didn't understand the bigger picture. Thought about Taehyun's arms around me, and the way his presence made me feel safer than I had in years. What would that mean? I asked quietly. Your protection? It means I assign people to watch both of you, he said. It means you let me drive you places until this is resolved. It means your sister gets security on campus and you don't walk alone at night. It means you trust me to keep you safe while I deal with the Chong problem. For how long? However long it takes. I looked at him in the shadows of the parking garage, this dangerous, complicated man who'd somehow become my safety net in the space of a week. Everything in my life had been about being independent, being strong, taking care of things myself. Accepting help felt like weakness, like admitting I couldn't handle my own problems. But Luna's life wasn't mine to gamble with. And if I was honest with myself, the thought of Taehyun's protection didn't feel like weakness. It felt like the first deep breath I'd taken since my parents died. Okay, I whispered. We accept your help. The relief on his face was palpable. He pressed his forehead to mine, eyes closed, breathing me in like I was something precious. Thank you for trusting me, he said. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise. He drove me home carefully, parking in front of my building while I dug out my keys. Before I could open the door, he caught my wrist gently. This is my personal phone number, he said, pressing a sleek smartphone into my hands. It's programmed with only one contact. Me. If anything feels wrong, if you're scared, if you just need to hear my voice, you call immediately. I don't care what time it is or what I'm doing. You're my priority now. I looked at the phone, then at him. Why are you doing this? Really? Because when I saw that car following you, he said quietly, I understood something. I've been dead inside since I came home from Afghanistan, just going through motions and trying to survive my own mind. But you make me feel alive again, Hannah. You make me want to be better, to be someone worthy of the kindness you showed me. So I'm protecting you because I care about you, and because I need you to be safe so I can figure out if what I'm feeling is real or just gratitude. It's real, I said, surprising myself with the certainty. I feel it too. His smile was worth every complication, every danger, every fear. Get some sleep, he said. I'll have someone outside your building all night. Tomorrow we'll set up proper security for Luna's campus. I nodded, clutching the phone like a lifeline as I headed into my building. From my apartment window, I watched his car idle on the street below until I turned out my light. Only then did he drive away, leaving another vehicle in his place to keep watch. Luna would have questions in the morning about the new phone and the man suddenly in my life and the security I'd have to explain. Marco would have opinions about me getting deeper into the Park family orbit. My logical mind would list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But lying in bed, feeling the weight of Taehyun's protection settling around me like armor, all I could think was that for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel alone in keeping my family safe. And that was worth whatever came next. The week that followed the incident with the car established a new normal that felt both surreal and strangely comfortable. True to his word, Taehyun arranged security for Luna's community college campus, 2 quiet men who blended into the background but were always present when she moved between classes. My sister had been skeptical at first, her independence chafing against the constant surveillance, but after I explained what had happened that night, her objections faded into grudging acceptance. For me, security meant Taehyun himself more often than not. He appeared at Marcelo's every night as my shift ended, leaning against that sleek black sedan with his hands in his pockets and an expression that softened the moment I stepped outside. The drives home became the highlight of my days, those quiet minutes in the darkness when conversation flowed easier than it should between 2 people who barely knew each other. He told me about growing up as the oldest son in a family where power came with expectations he tried to escape by enlisting. I told him about my parents, the good memories before the accident, the way grief could ambush you years later with something as simple as a song or a smell. He opened up about his unit in Afghanistan, the brothers he'd lost, the weight of command decisions that kept him awake at night. I shared my fears about failing Luna, about not being enough to replace the parents she'd lost. The touches started small. His hand at the small of my back, guiding me through a door. My fingers brushing his when he handed me coffee. The way he'd tuck a strand of hair behind my ear when the wind caught it. His fingertips lingering against my cheek just a second longer than necessary. Each contact sent electricity through my nervous system, awareness building between us like a storm gathering strength. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after that first night at Marcelo's, everything shifted. I was closing my section when Taehyun appeared earlier than usual, his expression grim in a way that made my stomach clench. He waited while I finished my duties, but the easy warmth that usually characterized his presence had been replaced by cold calculation that reminded me he was more than just the gentle man who'd been courting me with coffee and conversation. "We need to talk," he said once we were in his car, and those 4 words never meant anything good. He drove without explanation, taking us not toward my apartment, but deeper into downtown Seattle, where the buildings climbed toward the sky and rent cost more per month than I made in a year. He pulled into an underground garage beneath a residential tower, used a key card to access the private elevator, and finally spoke as we ascended. "The Chong faction knows where you live," he said quietly. "They've had people watching your building for 3 days. It's not safe for you to go back there." My heart stuttered. "Luna," I started, but he cut me off gently. "Already at my parents' house with security. I had her picked up from campus an hour ago. She's safe, I promise. But you can't go home, Hannah. Not until this is resolved." The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, lights twinkling like stars below. The space was modern and masculine, all clean lines and dark wood, but personal touches softened the designer perfection. Books lined built-in shelves, photos of his family clustered on side tables, and I spotted a pair of worn running shoes kicked off by the door that made him suddenly more human. "This is your place," I said, stating the obvious because my brain was still processing the luxury surrounding me. "This is where I want you to stay," he corrected, setting my bag down by the entrance. "The guest room is yours for as long as you need it. You'll be safe here. The building has top security, and my people control access. No one gets to you without going through me first." I walked to the windows, looked out at Seattle spread below us, and tried to wrap my mind around how completely my life had changed in 7 days. A week ago, I was a waitress with a simple, if difficult life, focused on bills and Luna's education and surviving each day. Now I was standing in a crime boss's son's penthouse, accepting his protection because people I didn't know wanted to use me as leverage in a war I didn't understand. "How long?" I asked, my reflection ghostly in the glass. "How long until it's safe to go home?" "I don't know," he admitted, coming to stand beside me. "The Chong faction is being more aggressive than expected. We're working on a solution, but these things take time." I turned to face him, studied the tension in his jaw and shoulders. "What kind of solution?" His dark eyes met mine with uncomfortable honesty. "The kind that involves making them understand that touching you or your sister means going to war with my entire family. The kind that requires a show of force they can't ignore." "Violence," I said flatly. "Yes," he confirmed without flinching. "I won't lie to you about what I am or what I do, Hannah. If they push, I'll push back harder. That's the only language that works in my world." I should have been horrified. Should have grabbed my bag and called a cab and run as far from this dangerous, beautiful man as possible. But looking at him, seeing the protective fury barely leashed beneath his control, all I felt was safe. Cherished. Worth defending. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll stay." The relief that crossed his features made him look younger, less burdened. "Thank you for trusting me," he said, then seemed to catch himself. "You must be exhausted. Let me show you the guest room." He led me down a hallway to a spacious bedroom with an attached bathroom that was nicer than any hotel I'd ever stayed in. My small duffel bag that I kept in my locker at work sat on the bed, already retrieved by his security team along with some of my clothes from the apartment. The thoughtfulness of it, the care taken to make this transition easier, made my throat tight. "I cook breakfast around 7 if you're awake," he said from the doorway. "Help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you're hungry before then. If you need anything at all, my room is at the end of the hall." "Taehyun," I said, stopping him before he could leave. "Thank you for all of this. I know it's a lot of trouble." "You're not trouble," he said firmly. "You're important. There's a difference." He closed the door softly behind him, and I was alone in the guest room, my heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. I woke the next morning to the smell of something delicious and unfamiliar. Following my nose to the kitchen, I found Taehyun standing at the stove wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt that showed off the muscled definition of his back and arms. His hair was slightly mussed from sleep, and he was humming something under his breath as he stirred whatever was simmering in the pan. "Morning," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned with a smile that did dangerous things to my pulse. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. I'm making juk, it's Korean rice porridge. My mother's recipe. It smells amazing," I said honestly, moving to stand beside him at the stove. "What's in it?" "Rice, obviously," he said with a slight grin. "Chicken, garlic, ginger, sesame oil. Comfort food, basically. My mom made it for me every time I came home from deployment." He ladled the porridge into bowls, garnished them with green onions and sesame seeds, and we sat at his kitchen island as morning light streamed through the massive windows. The first bite was heaven, savory and warming, coating my mouth with rich flavor. "This is incredible," I told him, and meant it. "Where did you learn to cook?" "My mother insisted all her sons know their way around a kitchen," he explained. "Said she wasn't raising men who'd be helpless without a woman to feed them." My brothers mostly ignored the lessons, but I found it calming. Cooking is one of the few times my brain shuts up and just focuses on the task. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he started teaching me basic Korean words. Juk for porridge, gamsahamnida for thank you, sarangi for I love you. Though he said that one quickly and moved on before I could process the weight of it. The domesticity of the moment struck me, how natural it felt to share breakfast with him in the morning light, learning pieces of his culture and history. Like we'd been doing this for years instead of days. Like this was already home. That night, I learned another piece of who Taehyun Park really was. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from the emotional upheaval of the past week, and fallen asleep easily in the comfortable guest bed. But sometime around 2 in the morning, a sound woke me. A cry, muffled but desperate, coming from down the hall. I lay there for a moment, debating whether to check on him or respect his privacy. The cry came again. Words in Korean I didn't understand, but the pain in them was universal. Before I could second-guess myself, I was padding down the hallway in the oversized t-shirt I slept in, pushing open the door to his room. The master bedroom was darker than mine, blackout curtains blocking the city lights. But I could make out Taehyun's form on the bed, sheets tangled around his legs, body rigid with tension. He was asleep, but clearly trapped in a nightmare, head turning back and forth, hands clenched in the fabric. "No," he said, the word torn from somewhere deep and anguished. "No. Get down. They're coming. We have to move." I approached the bed carefully, remembering his violence during the restaurant incident, aware that waking someone from a nightmare could be dangerous. "Taehyun," I said softly, keeping my distance. "You're dreaming. You're safe at home." He didn't respond, caught deeper in whatever hell his subconscious had dragged him to. His breathing was rapid and shallow, panic attack building even in sleep. I made a decision and sat on the edge of his bed, close enough to touch, but ready to move if needed. "Taehyun," I said more firmly, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Wake up. You're in Seattle, in your home. Whatever you're seeing isn't real anymore." His eyes flew open, wild and unfocused in the darkness. For a heartbeat, I thought he might lash out, might not recognize me. But then awareness flooded back, and he focused on my face, his expression crumbling from terror to something worse. "Shame. Hannah," he breathed, sitting up and scrubbing his hands over his face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I thought I had it under control tonight." "Talk to me," I said gently, not moving from my position on his bed. "Tell me what you were dreaming about." For a long moment, I thought he'd refuse, would retreat behind the controlled facade he showed the world. But then he started talking, words spilling out like a wound that had been festering too long finally opened. "It was my last deployment," he said, staring at his hands in the dim light. "We were on patrol in Kandahar province, routine convoy movement. I was the senior officer, responsible for the men. We'd done the route 100 times. But this time there was an IED, buried deep enough our equipment didn't catch it. The lead vehicle was destroyed. 3 of my men died instantly. 2 more were injured so badly they didn't survive the medevac." His voice broke on the last words, and I watched him struggle to contain the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. I took his hand, threaded my fingers through his, and held on while he fell apart. It was my responsibility, he continued, tears streaming down his face now. I should have seen it, should have checked better, should have done something different. They died because I failed them. 5 families got destruction notices because I wasn't good enough to keep my unit safe. The grief in his voice shattered something in my chest. I moved closer, wrapped my arms around him, and pulled his head down to my shoulder. He resisted for a second, then collapsed against me, his larger frame curling into mine as sobs racked his body. I held him and stroked his hair and murmured wordless comfort, giving him permission to break in a way I suspected he rarely allowed himself. When the storm finally passed, he stayed pressed against me, his face buried in my neck, breathing me in like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my skin. "You shouldn't have to see this, shouldn't have to deal with how broken I am." I pulled back enough to cup his face in my hands, making him look at me. "You're not broken," I said firmly. "You're wounded, and that's different. You survived something terrible, and you're still fighting the effects. That's not weakness, Taehyun. That's strength." "I don't feel strong," he admitted quietly. "I feel like I'm barely holding myself together most of the time." "Then let me help hold you together," I said. "You've been protecting me, keeping me safe. Let me give you some of that back." His eyes searched mine in the darkness, looking for something I wasn't sure I understood. Then his hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb stroking across my skin with heartbreaking gentleness. "You make me want to be better," he said softly. "When I'm with you, the noise in my head quiets and I can breathe again. I've never had that before." The air between us thickened with awareness, tension that had been building all week finally reaching critical mass. His gaze dropped to my lips, and I stopped breathing, every nerve ending alive with anticipation. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away, and I tilted my face up in answer. Our lips were a breath apart when he stopped, his jaw clenching with visible effort. "No," he said, the words seeming to cost him. "Not like this. Not when you just watch me fall apart and probably feel sorry for me. When I kiss you, I want it to be because you want me, not because you're trying to comfort me." "I do want you," I whispered, but he was already pulling back, putting distance between us even as his hand lingered on my face. "You should go back to bed," he said, his voice rough. Before I forget all the reasons this is a bad idea. I wanted to argue, to tell him that comforting someone didn't make desire less real, that I'd been wanting him since he first smiled at me in that alley. But I could see the resolve in his expression, the determination to do what he perceived as the right thing even when it clearly cost him. "Okay," I said softly, standing from his bed. "But Taehyun, you're not broken, and I'm not going anywhere." His smile was slight, but genuine. "Good night, Hannah. Thank you for waking me." I returned to my room, but didn't sleep, too wired from the almost kiss and the vulnerability he'd shown me. Somewhere down the hall, I suspected he was equally awake, equally affected by what had almost happened between us. 2 days later, his mother summoned us both to family lunch. The Park family home was in an exclusive neighborhood overlooking Puget Sound, a modern mansion that managed to blend traditional Korean architectural elements with Pacific Northwest aesthetics. Taehyun was tense during the drive, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "My mother can be intense," he warned as we pulled through the gates. "She means well, but she doesn't have much of a filter. If she asks anything too personal, just tell her it's none of her business. She'll respect that." But when Mrs. Park opened the door, her face lit up with such genuine warmth that my nervousness evaporated. She was petite and elegant, probably in her early 60s, with kind eyes and a smile that I recognized in her son's rare moments of unguarded joy. "You must be Hannah," she said, pulling me into a hug before I could offer to shake hands. "Thank you for being patient with my Taehyun. He has been so much better since he met you." "Yama," Taehyun said, his tone carrying warning and affection in equal measure. "Don't embarrass me. I'm his mother. I'm supposed to embarrass him," she replied with a grin, then linked her arm through mine and led me inside. "Come." I made too much food as always. The lunch was elaborate, course after course of Korean dishes that Mrs. Park explained with pride. Taehyun's father was there, the imposing man from the restaurant, and while he was more reserved than his wife, I caught him watching me with approval. The youngest brother, Min Jae was charming and teasing, asking questions about how I'd tamed his scary older brother. The middle brother was absent, handling business matters in Portland. Throughout the meal, Mrs. Park peppered me with questions about my family, my work, my dreams for the future. When I mentioned Luna and how I'd been raising her since our parents died, tears filled her eyes, and she reached across to squeeze my hand. "You are very strong to take care of your sister so young," she said. "Very strong and very kind. My Taehyun needs someone strong and kind." After the meal, while Taehyun was in his father's study discussing security matters, Min Jae found me on the back patio overlooking the sound. He was younger than Taehyun by several years, probably close to my age, and where his older brother was intense and controlled, Min Jae seemed more relaxed and open. "So you're the famous Hannah," he said, leaning against the railing beside me. "The woman who got through to Taehyun when no one else could." "I just helped him during a difficult moment," I said, uncomfortable with the weight everyone seemed to place on that first night. Min Jae shook his head. "You don't understand. My brother came back from Afghanistan broken in ways we couldn't fix. He wouldn't talk to therapists, wouldn't take medication, just white-knuckled his way through every day trying to pretend he was fine. But with you, he's different. He smiles. He sleeps more. He started talking about the future instead of just surviving the present." "I'm glad I can help," I said carefully. "But you need to understand something," Min Jae continued, his expression turning serious. "Our world is dangerous, Hannah. Not just the Chong situation, but always. People who get close to our family become targets. The violence Taehyun tries to shield you from, it's constant. Before you get in too deep, you need to decide if you can really handle that." I looked out at the water, considering his words. Your brother asked me the same thing, more or less. Whether I understood what I was getting into. "And do you?" "I'm starting to," I replied honestly. "But Min Jae, I've spent 5 years being afraid. Afraid I'll fail my sister. Afraid I'll lose more people I love. Afraid I'm not strong enough for the responsibility I carry. Being with Taehyun, accepting his protection, it's the first time I've felt like I don't have to carry everything alone. So yes, your world scares me. But being without him scares me more." Min Jae studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good answer. Just promise me something. Don't let him use his need to protect you as an excuse to shut you out. He has a tendency to think he's doing people favors by pushing them away when things get dangerous. Make him let you in." "I promise," I said, and meant it. That evening, as Taehyun drove us back to his penthouse in comfortable silence, his phone rang. He answered on speaker, and I heard one of his men reporting in clipped professional tones that made my blood run cold. "The Chong hit one of our businesses," the voice said. "The import warehouse in Georgetown. 3 of our people hospitalized, 1 critical. They're making a statement." I watched the transformation happen in real time. The gentle man who'd cooked me breakfast and held my hand during lunch disappeared, replaced by something cold and lethal. His jaw set. His eyes went flat and calculating, every muscle in his body coiling with controlled violence. "Assemble the team," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I want everyone at the Georgetown safe house in 30 minutes. And get me everything we have on Chong's current operations. Every location, every soldier, every asset." He ended the call and glanced at me, something almost apologetic flickering across his features before the mask settled back in place. "I have to go handle this," he said quietly. "I'll have someone stay with you at the penthouse, but I need to deal with this situation personally." "What are you going to do?" I asked, though I already knew. "What I have to," he replied. "They hurt my people. They threatened you. That requires a response they'll understand." I reached over and took his hand, the one not gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckle intensity. "Be careful," I said. His expression softened for just a moment. "I will. For you. I'll come back safe." But watching him walk out of the penthouse 30 minutes later, dressed in all black and carrying a tension that spoke of imminent violence, I understood fully for the first time what Min Jae had meant. This was the reality of Taehyun's world, the darkness that lived beneath his gentleness. He was going to hurt people tonight, maybe kill them, and he'd do it without hesitation to protect what was his. And somehow, knowing that he included me in what he'd go to war for made me feel more precious than any flowers or chocolate ever could. He came home at 3 in the morning. I heard the penthouse door open from where I sat curled on the living room couch, pretending to read, but mostly just staring at the same page for the past 2 hours. My heart had been in my throat since he'd left, imagining all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways I might lose him before I'd really had him. Taehyun appeared in the doorway, and my breath caught. His black shirt was torn at the shoulder, specks of blood on the fabric that I desperately hoped wasn't his. His knuckles were scraped raw, already bruising, and exhaustion lined his face in a way that made him look years older. But he was whole. He was here. He'd come back to me. "You should be asleep," he said quietly, his voice hoarse like he'd been shouting. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted, setting down the book I hadn't been reading. "Not while you were out there." Something shifted in his expression, tenderness breaking through the cold calculation he'd worn when he left. He moved into the living room slowly, like his body ached, and I stood to meet him. Without asking permission, I took his damaged hands in mine, examining the split skin across his knuckles with gentle fingers. "Come on," I said softly. "Let me clean these up." I led him to his bathroom, the massive space all marble and glass, and made him sit on the edge of the tub while I gathered supplies from the medicine cabinet. He watched me in silence as I knelt between his legs, carefully cleaning the blood from his hands with warm water and antiseptic. He flinched when the antiseptic touched raw skin, but didn't pull away. "Did you kill anyone tonight?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral, needing to know but not wanting to judge. "No," he said after a pause. "But I hurt people badly enough they'll think twice about coming after what's mine again. The Chong will get the message." His hands were shaking slightly under mine, adrenaline crash setting in now that he was safe. I wrapped gauze around his worst knuckles, securing it with medical tape, then pressed a kiss to his palm that made his breath hitch. "Thank you for coming back to me," I whispered. He cupped my face with his bandaged hands, tilting my head up so I had to meet his eyes. "There was nowhere else I wanted to be," he said simply. "I handled what needed handling, and then all I could think about was getting back to you." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath the violence, broke something loose in my chest. I'd spent 5 years holding everything together through sheer force of will, being strong for Luna, never letting myself lean on anyone or admit how much I was struggling. But looking at Taehyun, seeing the same exhaustion and fear and determination in his eyes that I felt every day, I realized I didn't want to be strong alone anymore. "I need to tell you something," I said, the words spilling out before I could second-guess them. "About the night my parents died." He went very still, his hands steady on my face, giving me his complete attention in that focused way he had that made me feel like the only person in the world. "I was supposed to be in the car with them," I continued, the confession I'd never fully made to anyone tearing free. "We were all going to Luna's high school play together. But I got called in to cover a shift at the restaurant because someone was sick, and I needed the money, so I said I'd meet them there. They went without me, and a drunk driver ran a red light and killed them both instantly." Tears were streaming down my face now, and I couldn't stop them, couldn't contain the guilt that had lived in my chest for 5 years. If I'd been there, if I'd just said no to that shift, maybe things would have been different. Maybe the timing would have been off, and they'd have missed that intersection by 30 seconds. Maybe I could have done something. Instead, I chose money over family, and they died. "Hannah," he said softly, his thumbs wiping at my tears. "You know that's not rational. You know you couldn't have changed what happened. But I feel it anyway," I whispered. "And now I'm terrified, Taehyun. I'm terrified of caring about you because everyone I love leaves or gets taken, and I don't think I could survive losing someone else. But I can't seem to stop myself from falling for you, and it's scaring me to death." He pulled me up from my kneeling position, settled me onto his lap, and wrapped his arms around me while I cried into his shoulder. One hand stroked my back in soothing circles, and the other cradled my head, holding me together while I fell apart. "Too late," he finally said when my tears had subsided to hiccups. "Too late to protect your heart from me, Hannah. I'm already gone for you. From the moment you walked toward me instead of away in that restaurant, when everyone else saw a monster and you saw someone who needed help, I was done. You make me want to be better than what I am. You make me want to build something beyond violence and survival. So I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure nothing takes me from you." He pulled back enough to cup my face in his hands, his dark eyes intense and certain. "I'm in love with you," he said, the words deliberate and clear. "I know it's fast and probably crazy given the circumstances, but I've never been more sure of anything. I love your compassion and your strength and the way you refuse to be afraid of me, even when you should be. I love how you take care of everyone around you and how you're learning to let me take care of you. I love you, Hannah Reed, and I need you to know that before anything else happens." My heart was thundering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every logical part of my brain said this was moving too fast, that you couldn't fall in love in 2 weeks, that the intensity of the situation was creating false intimacy. But my heart, the part of me that had been locked down tight since my parents died, knew the truth. "I love you too," I whispered, and saying it felt like stepping off a cliff and discovering I could fly. He kissed me then, finally, after all the almost moments and building tension. His lips were gentle against mine, questioning, giving me space to pull away. But I'd been wanting this since that night in his bedroom when he'd stopped himself, and I wrapped my arms around his neck and pulled him closer. The kiss deepened, his tongue tracing the seam of my lips until I opened for him. He tasted like mint and something darker, something that was uniquely him. His hands slid from my face to my hair, tangling in the strands, angling my head for better access. I pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against mine, the way his heart raced under my palm. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had darkened with want. "I need to know if you want this," he said, his voice rough. "Because if we go further, I'm not sure I'll be able to stop." "I want this," I said clearly, needing him to have no doubts. "I want you." He stood in one smooth motion, keeping me in his arms, and carried me down the hallway to his bedroom. The gesture was old-fashioned and romantic and made me feel cherished in a way I'd never experienced. He set me down beside his bed, the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows casting shadows across his face. "Are you sure?" he asked again, his hands framing my face. "Because we can wait. I'll wait as long as you need." In answer, I pulled his torn shirt over his head, revealing the muscled planes of his chest and abdomen. He had scars, I noticed, thin white lines that spoke of violence survived. I traced them with my fingers and felt him shiver under my touch. "Tell me if I do anything you don't like," he said quietly, his hands moving to the hem of my shirt. "Tell me if you want me to slow down or stop. This is about us, about being together. Nothing else matters." He pulled my shirt off slowly, giving me time to object, then kissed along my shoulder with heartbreaking gentleness. His hands spanned my waist, thumbs stroking the sensitive skin there, and I felt heat pooling low in my belly. Every touch was deliberate, worshipful, like he was memorizing me. "You're so beautiful," he murmured against my skin, switching between English and Korean in a way that made my toes curl. "Niamu Ariamde. So precious to me." His hands were shaking slightly as he unclasped my bra, his control fraying around the edges. But he kept his movements slow and careful, checking my face constantly for any sign of discomfort. When I reached for the button on his pants, he caught my hands. "This is about you tonight," he said. "Let me take care of you." He laid me back on his bed, the sheets cool against my heated skin, and took his time removing the rest of my clothes. Each new inch of skin revealed was greeted with kisses and whispered praise that made me feel like the most precious thing in his world. By the time we were both bare, I was trembling with need and emotion. He settled between my thighs, his weight braced on his forearms so he wasn't crushing me, and kissed me deeply. One hand slid down my body, touch light and exploratory, learning what made me gasp and arch into him. When his fingers finally found where I was aching for him, I couldn't contain the sound that escaped my throat. "Okay?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of going slow. "More than okay," I managed, pulling him down for another kiss. He took his time, building the pleasure with patient dedication until I was writhing beneath him, desperate for more. When he finally positioned himself at my entrance, he paused, looking into my eyes. "I love you," he said. "Thank you for trusting me with this." Then he pushed inside slowly, carefully, giving my body time to adjust. The stretch was intense, but not painful, fullness that felt right in a way I couldn't articulate. He stayed still once he was fully seated, breathing hard, letting me adjust. "Move," I finally whispered, and he did. The rhythm he set was slow and deep, each thrust deliberate and controlled. He kissed me throughout, swallowing my gasps and moans, whispering endearments in Korean that I didn't understand but felt in my bones. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together beside my head, connecting us in every way possible. The pleasure built steadily, heat coiling tighter in my core with each movement. He shifted his angle slightly, and suddenly I was seeing stars, pleasure so intense it was almost overwhelming. He felt it in how my body tightened around him, and he reached between us to add pressure exactly where I needed it. "Come for me," he said roughly against my ear. "Let me feel you." The orgasm crashed over me in waves, stealing my breath and making my vision white out. He followed moments later, my name a prayer on his lips, his body shuddering as he found his own release. We stayed locked together for long moments after, both trying to catch our breath. He finally rolled to the side, pulling me with him so I was tucked against his chest, his arms wrapped securely around me. I could feel his heart hammering against my cheek, gradually slowing as the intensity faded. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Did I hurt you?" "I'm perfect," I assured him, tilting my face up to kiss his jaw. "That was perfect." His smile was soft and satisfied, younger than I'd ever seen him look. "Sleep?" he murmured, pulling the blankets over us. "I've got you." I woke to morning light and the sensation of being watched. Tae-hyun was propped on one elbow beside me, studying my face with an expression of such tender wonder that it made my chest ache. "Morning," I said, suddenly shy despite what we'd shared the night before. "Morning, beautiful," he replied, leaning down to kiss me softly. "How do you feel?" "Happy," I admitted. "Really happy." His answering smile could have lit the whole city. "Stay here," he said, sliding out of bed. "I'm making us breakfast in bed." He pulled on sweatpants and disappeared, leaving me to burrow deeper into his sheets that smelled like him and us together. He returned 15 minutes later with a tray loaded with fruit, pastries from a bakery I recognized as expensive, and perfectly made coffee. We ate in comfortable silence, stealing kisses between bites, the intimacy of the moment almost overwhelming. This was what I'd been missing, I realized. This feeling of being cherished and safe and allowed to just be soft. "Come to family dinner tonight," he said as we finished eating. "Let me introduce you properly as my girlfriend, not just the woman I'm protecting." "I want that," I said honestly. "I want to be part of your life, all of it." The dinner that evening at his parents' house was warm and welcoming. His mother hugged me like I was already family. His father nodded approval, and Min Jae teased his brother mercilessly about finally finding someone who could handle him. Over Korean barbecue and too much soju, I felt myself relaxing into this chosen family, finding a place that fit. But by Monday, cabin fever had set in despite how wonderful the weekend had been. I'd called in sick to Marcelo's for a week, but I missed the routine of work, the normalcy of serving tables, and chatting with regular customers. I missed feeling useful and independent instead of protected and tucked away. "I need to go back to work," I told Tae-hyun over breakfast. "I know you want me safe, but I can't just hide forever." His jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "Okay, but you take security with you. Two of my best people, and you don't leave their sight for any reason." I agreed, grateful he wasn't trying to forbid me, and that evening returned to Marcelo's for my regular shift. My coworkers welcomed me back with questions and concern, and Marco gave me a long look that said he knew exactly where I'd been and with whom. The shift was blissfully normal until near closing. Jessica pulled me aside in a panic, explaining that her roommate had locked her out of their apartment and she needed to get her spare key from her car in the parking garage, but was terrified to go alone this late. I glanced at my security, both positioned by the front entrance, and made a quick decision. "Come on, I'll walk with you," I told her. "It'll take 2 minutes." It was a mistake. We were in the dimly lit parking garage, Jessica fumbling with her car lock, when I heard the footsteps. Fast, purposeful, multiple people. I spun around and saw 3 men approaching, their intent clear in their body language. "Run," I shouted at Jessica, shoving her toward the stairwell. She ran, her heels echoing on concrete, smart enough not to argue. I tried to follow, but hands grabbed me from behind, strong and professional. I screamed, fighting with everything I had, remembering the self-defense classes I'd taken in college. I got an elbow into someone's ribs, heard a grunt of pain, but there were too many of them. Something pressed against my neck, a sharp sting, and the world went fuzzy around the edges. Sedative, some distant part of my brain recognized. I tried to keep fighting, but my limbs wouldn't cooperate, going heavy and unresponsive. The last thing I remembered before darkness claimed me was being lifted into a van, and the bitter regret that I'd never get to tell Taehyun I loved him one more time. Somewhere across the city, my phone lay on the parking garage floor where it had fallen during the struggle, screen cracked, but still displaying his last text. On my way to surprise you at work. Love you. And Taehyun Park. Arriving at Marcelo's 15 minutes later to find Jessica hysterical, my security team frantically searching, and signs of a struggle in the parking garage, transformed into something that would haunt the Chong faction for the rest of their very short lives. Because they had made a critical miscalculation. They'd taken the one thing in the world that made him want to be human instead of monster. And now he had nothing left to lose. I woke to darkness and the smell of mildew. My head throbbed where they'd injected me, and my wrists ached from zip ties cutting into skin. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust enough to make out my surroundings. Warehouse, empty except for some crates and a single metal chair. Concrete floor cold beneath me where I sat tied to a support beam. No windows that I could see, just industrial lights hanging from exposed beams above. Fear tried to claw its way up my throat, but I forced it down. Panic wouldn't help. I needed to think, to stay calm, to remember that Taehyun would be looking for me. He'd find me. He had to find me. The door opened with a screech of metal on concrete. 3 men entered. The ones who'd grabbed me from the parking garage, plus an older man in an expensive suit who radiated authority. This had to be someone important in the Chong organization, someone who thought taking me would give them leverage. Miss Reed, the older man said in accented English, his tone almost pleasant. I apologize for the accommodations. This is just business, you understand. Nothing personal. Kidnapping seems pretty personal, I managed, proud that my voice didn't shake. He smiled slightly, pulling over the metal chair to sit facing me. My name is Mr. Chong. I believe you know my organization has some disagreements with the Park family. You've become quite important to young Taehyun, which makes you valuable to me. I'm nobody, I said. Just a waitress he was helping out. You've made a mistake. Mr. Chong shook his head slowly. We've been watching you for 2 weeks, Miss Reed. We know you've been living in his penthouse. We know he introduced you to his family as his girlfriend. We know he's in love with you, which is unfortunate for you because it means he'll do anything to get you back, including giving me what I want. What do you want? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. His family controls import routes through the port that I need access to. They've refused to negotiate. But I think with the right motivation, they'll see reason. You're going to call your boyfriend and tell him that your safety depends on his father's cooperation. I won't do that, I said firmly. His expression hardened. Miss Reed, I don't think you understand your situation. You have no leverage here. You will make that call, or I will make you very uncomfortable until you change your mind. Do what you need to do, I said, meeting his eyes despite the terror coursing through me. I'm not helping you hurt his family. Mr. Chong studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering across his features. You're either very brave or very stupid, he said. I haven't decided which. We'll see how long your loyalty lasts. He stood and gestured to his men. Don't hurt her, not yet. Let her sit and think about her choices. We have time. They left me alone in the darkness, hours bleeding together with nothing to mark their passage. I was thirsty and my shoulders screamed from the awkward position, but I focused on breathing, on staying present, on believing that Taehyun was coming. He'd promised to keep me safe. He'd promised he wouldn't let anything happen to me. I had to trust that promise. Across the city, Taehyun Park was systematically dismantling the Chong organization piece by piece. I learned this later, heard it from Min Jae and his father, pieced together the 48 hours I spent in that warehouse from fragments others shared. But what I understood in the moment was that when Taehyun found my phone on that parking garage floor, something in him snapped. The careful control he maintained, the humanity he'd been rebuilding since Afghanistan, the gentle man who'd made me breakfast and held me through nightmares. All of it burned away in the face of losing me. What remained was the soldier, the killer, the weapon he'd been trained to be. He started with my kidnapper's associates, the low-level soldiers who'd made the mistake of being visible. His people picked them up one by one, and Taehyun extracted information with cold efficiency that had even his own men unsettled. He didn't torture for pleasure, Min Jae told me later. He simply did what was necessary to get answers and moved on. Clinical, precise, terrifying. Each piece of information led to the next target. A warehouse in Tacoma where Chong stored weapons. A house in Bellevue where mid-level operatives lived. A restaurant in Federal Way that served as a front. Tae-hyun hit them all within 36 hours, moving with his military unit through hostile territory, leaving a trail of destruction that made it clear what happened when you took something that belonged to the Park family. His father tried to rein him in after the first 12 hours, concerned about the attention and the escalation. But Tae-hyun looked at him with eyes empty of everything except purpose and said, "They took her. Everything else is secondary." Even Mr. Park, a man who'd built an empire on calculated violence, took a step back from his oldest son in that moment. Min Jae stayed with him throughout, watching his brother become someone he barely recognized. Tae-hyun didn't eat or sleep, operating on pure adrenaline and rage, coordinating multiple teams simultaneously while personally leading the most dangerous raids. He'd learned patience and planning in the army, how to gather intelligence and strike decisively, and he brought all of it to bear on finding me. By hour 40, they had a location. A warehouse in Georgetown, owned by a shell company traced back to Chong interests. Surveillance confirmed guards posted outside and heat signatures inside that matched a small group of people. It had to be where they were holding me. Tae-hyun assembled his team, 12 men he'd trained personally, equipped with weapons that were definitely illegal but highly effective. They moved in just before dawn, using darkness and the element of surprise to their advantage. I heard them coming before I saw them. Gunfire, sharp and decisive, followed by shouting in Korean. My captors scrambled, grabbing weapons and taking defensive positions. Mr. Chong appeared, his earlier calm replaced by anger and concern. "Your boyfriend is here," he said, crouching beside me, making quite the mess of my operation. "I hope you're worth all this trouble to him." Before I could respond, the warehouse door exploded inward. I watched through blurred vision as Tae-hyun and his men poured through, moving with military precision that was beautiful and horrible to witness. They didn't hesitate, didn't offer chances to surrender. They'd come for me, and anything in their path was eliminated. Tae-hyun moved like death itself, calm and controlled despite the chaos. I watched him shoot a man who raised a weapon in his direction, the motion so fluid it seemed choreographed. Another came at him from the side, and he disarmed them with brutal efficiency, breaking bones without apparent effort before moving on. He was magnificent and terrifying, everything dangerous about him on full display, and I couldn't look away. Mr. Chong made a decision, grabbing me and hauling me up with a knife pressed to my throat. "Stop," he shouted, his voice carrying across the warehouse. "Stop, or I kill her." Everything froze. Tae-hyun's head snapped toward us, and even from across the space I could see his eyes go wide with recognition and fear. He held up one hand, signaling his men to hold fire, and slowly lowered his own weapon. "Let her go, Chong," he said, his voice steady despite the tension vibrating through his frame. "This is between you and me. She's got nothing to do with our business." "She has everything to do with it now," Mr. Chong replied, backing toward a side door with me as his shield. "You've destroyed half my operations in 2 days, killed my men, cost me millions in lost product. You think I'm just going to let that go? I'm giving you one chance to walk away alive," Tae-hyun said, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. "Let her go now, and I'll make it quick. Keep her, and what I do to you will last days." The knife pressed harder against my throat, and I felt blood trickle down my neck. Mr. Chong was sweating now, realizing his miscalculation. He'd thought taking me would give him leverage, would force negotiation. But he was learning what I already knew. You didn't negotiate with Tae-hyun Park when someone he loved was threatened. You just died. Tae-hyun moved faster than should have been possible for someone his size. 1 second he was 10 feet away, the next he was on us. His hand locked around Mr. Chong's wrist, forcing the knife away from my throat with strength that seemed superhuman. His other hand caught the older man's throat, and I felt myself pulled free and pushed behind him in one smooth motion. "Don't look," he said to me, his voice gentle for just that moment. "Close your eyes, baby. Don't watch this." But I couldn't close my eyes. I watched as he systematically destroyed the man who'd taken me, each blow calculated and devastating. It was over in seconds that felt like hours, and when it was done, Mr. Chong lay motionless on the concrete, and Tae-hyun was turning to me with blood on his hands and murder in his eyes that slowly faded to recognition. Hannah, he breathed, and then his hands were on me, checking for injuries with shaking fingers. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? Tell me what they did. I'm okay. I managed, though I was very much not okay. Just scared. They didn't hurt me. He pulled me against his chest so hard I could barely breathe, one hand cradling the back of my head while his whole body shuddered. I thought I lost you, he said roughly. I thought I was too late. You found me, I whispered against his shoulder. You came for me. Always, he said fiercely. Always, Hannah. There's nowhere you could be that I wouldn't find you. His men were clearing the warehouse, checking bodies, and securing the scene. Min Jae appeared at Taehyun's shoulder, his expression grim but relieved. We need to move, he said quietly. Police will have heard the shots. Taehyun nodded, scooped me into his arms like I weighed nothing, and carried me out to a waiting car. I caught glimpses of the carnage they'd left, the bodies and blood and destruction, all of it done to get me back. The scope of the violence should have horrified me. Instead, all I felt was safe. He took me to a house I'd never seen before, a safe house his family maintained in West Seattle overlooking the Sound. Carried me inside and set me carefully on a couch, then disappeared to speak with Min Jae in hushed, urgent tones. I heard fragments. Cleanup crew, police contacts, Chong's remaining lieutenants, message sent. When he returned, he'd washed the blood from his hands, but it still stained his clothes. He knelt in front of me, took my hands gently, and just looked at me like he was memorizing every detail. I need to know if you're really okay, he said quietly. I need to know they didn't hurt you in ways you're not telling me. They interrogated me, I said honestly. Asked me to call you, to help them leverage your family. I refused. Mr. Chong said he'd make me uncomfortable, but you got there before he could do anything. Just some bruises from the zip ties, and my wrists hurt. He examined my wrists with careful fingers, rage flickering across his features at the marks there. I'll kill them all over again, he said, the words a promise. They're already dead, I pointed out gently. Not all of them. The organization still has people who were part of this, who knew what was happening and did nothing to stop it. I'm going to find every single one. I cupped his face in my hands, making him focus on me instead of his vengeance. Taehyun, I'm safe now. You got me back. That's what matters. But for hours I thought you were gone, he said, his voice breaking. For 48 hours I tore this city apart looking for you, and all I could think about was the last thing I said to you was a text message. Not I love you in person. Not holding you one more time. Just a stupid text. Tears were streaming down his face now, the iron control finally crumbling in the aftermath of crisis. I had to do terrible things to find you, he continued. Things I swore I was done with when I left the army. I became the monster again, Hannah. I killed people without hesitation. I hurt them to get information. I was back in that place where human life only mattered if it helped me accomplish the mission. And the worst part is I'd do it all again. I'd do worse if it meant keeping you safe. I saw what you did, I said quietly. I watched you in that warehouse. I saw you kill that man, and I saw what you're capable of. He closed his eyes like I'd struck him. And now you know what I really am. I know you're the man who spent 2 days without sleep hunting for me. I corrected. I know you're willing to burn the world down to protect the people you love. I know you're dangerous and violent and capable of terrible things. And I love you anyway. I love you because of it, not in spite of it. His eyes flew open, searching mine for any hint of fear or deception. How can you say that? He asked desperately. How can you look at me after everything you witnessed and not run? Because I see all of you, I said, pulling him up onto the couch beside me. I see the gentle man who makes me breakfast and holds me when I cry. I see the broken soldier fighting his demons every day. I see the son who loves his mother and protects his family. And yes, I see the killer who destroys anyone who threatens what's his. All of it is you, Taehyun. You're not just one thing. And I'm choosing all of it. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Maybe not, I agreed. But you have me anyway. I'm not leaving you. I'm not afraid of the darkness in you because I see the light too. You make me feel safe and cherished and loved in a way I never thought I'd have. So I'm staying. I'm choosing you. All of you. And you don't get to push me away because you think I deserve better. He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, pulling me into his lap and burying his face in my neck. I love you, he said against my skin. I love you so much it terrifies me. You're everything good in my life, and I don't know how to be worthy of that. You already are, I assured him, holding him as tight as I could. Just by being you. Just by loving me back. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the aftermath of violence and fear, two broken people choosing to be whole together. Eventually he pulled back, wiping his eyes, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Then he slid off the couch and dropped to his knees in front of me, taking my bruised hands in his blood-stained ones. "Marry me," he said, the words urgent and desperate. "I know it's crazy and too fast, and we barely know each other, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. Marry me, Hannah. Be mine forever. Let me spend the rest of my life protecting you and loving you and trying to deserve the gift of your faith in me." My heart stopped, then started again so hard I thought it might break free from my chest. "Yes," I said, the words simple and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was incandescent, transforming his entire face. He surged up and kissed me deeply, tasting of salt and relief and promises. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I don't have a ring," he said. "I wasn't planning this. I just knew I couldn't let another day pass without asking you to be my wife." "I don't need a ring," I told him honestly. "I just need you. You have me," he promised. "For as long as you'll keep me, you have every part of me." We spent the night at the safe house, holding each other and talking about the future we'd almost lost. He told me about legitimate businesses his family was building, exit strategies from the criminal empire that would take years but were possible. I told him about dreams I'd set aside when my parents died, ambitions I'd thought were lost but maybe could be reclaimed. By morning, the immediate crisis had passed. The Chong organization was effectively dismantled, their leadership dead or in hiding, their operations shut down or absorbed by other families who knew better than to target the parks. The message had been sent clearly. Touch what belonged to Taehyun Park and face annihilation. His mother cried when we told her we were engaged, happy tears that she tried to hide by fussing over my bruised wrists and making me eat too much food. His father shook Taehyun's hand with something like pride, acknowledging that his oldest son had proven himself in the way that mattered most in their world. Protection of family. Min Jae pulled me aside while Taehyun was talking to his father. "I've never seen him like this," he said quietly. "In the 48 hours you were gone, he was someone I didn't recognize. Completely cold, absolutely focused, no mercy. It was terrifying." "I know," I said. "I saw some of it. But the second he found you, the second he knew you were safe, he came back," Min Jae continued. "You bring him back from that edge, Hannah. You give him a reason to be more than just the weapon. Promise me you'll keep doing that." "I promise," I said. "He does the same for me. He makes me feel like I don't have to carry everything alone anymore." "That's what family does," Min Jae said with a smile. "Welcome to ours. It's chaotic and dangerous and definitely illegal in places, but we protect each other." Standing in that warm house surrounded by people who'd accepted me, with Taehyun's arm around my waist and his mother planning our wedding, I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt since my parents died. Home. Safety. Belonging. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be adjustments to make, dangers to navigate, the slow process of building a life together from the ashes of violence and trauma. But looking at Taehyun, seeing the love and determination in his eyes, I knew we'd figure it out together. Because sometimes the most broken people find each other and discover that their jagged edges fit together perfectly, creating something stronger than either could be alone. And that was worth fighting for. The formal meeting happened 3 days after my rescue, in a private room at a downtown hotel that served as neutral territory. Taehyun wanted me nowhere near it, but I insisted on being present. This war had started because of me, and I needed to see it end. Mr. Park sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding respect even in the elegant surroundings. Taehyun sat to his right, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that somehow made him look even more dangerous than the tactical gear he'd worn during the rescue. Min Jae and 2 other Park family members filled out their side of the table. Across from them sat the new Chong leadership, a younger man named David Chong who'd been in Los Angeles during the violence and had the good sense to look appropriately humbled. He'd brought his own advisors, all of them clearly nervous to be in the same room as Taehyun after what he'd done to their organization. I sat in a chair against the wall, technically an observer, but really a reminder of what happened when you threatened the Park family. Mr. Park spoke first, his voice calm, but carrying unmistakable authority. The previous leadership made a catastrophic error in judgment, he said. They believed they could use leverage against my family without consequence. My son demonstrated why that belief was incorrect. David Chong nodded carefully. My uncle's actions were unauthorized and foolish, he said. I've assumed control of what remains of our operations, and I want to make it clear that we have no intention of continuing his vendetta. We seek peaceful coexistence moving forward. Tae-hyun leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes fixed on the younger Chong with predatory focus. Peaceful coexistence requires certain understandings, he said quietly. The first is that my family and anyone associated with us is completely off limits. The second is that you stay out of our territory. The third is that if I even suspect you're considering another move against us, I won't negotiate. I'll finish what I started. The threat hung in the air, all the more effective for being delivered in such a measured tone. David Chong swallowed hard and nodded. Understood completely. We'll maintain our current operations in Federal Way and Kent. No expansion into Park territory. No contact with Park family or associates. Mr. Park outlined the specific terms, boundaries clearly drawn, consequences for violations spelled out explicitly. By the end of the hour, a treaty had been established that would hold as long as both sides honored it. David Chong and his advisors left quickly, clearly relieved to escape with their lives and what remained of their organization. When the room cleared, Mr. Park turned to his oldest son with an expression of grim approval. You handled that well, he said. Both the violence and the negotiation. I was wrong to doubt whether you still had the strength for this world. I never wanted strength for this world, Tae-hyun replied quietly. I wanted out. But when they took Hannah, I remembered that protecting what matters is worth any cost. His father's gaze shifted to me, considering. She makes you better, he said finally. Stronger and more controlled simultaneously. That's rare. Your mother was right about her. That evening, the Park family gathered at the family home to celebrate both the peace treaty and our engagement. Mrs. Park had outdone herself, preparing a feast that covered every surface of the massive dining table. Luna was there too, having been brought from the safe house where she'd been staying during the crisis. My sister pulled me aside the moment she arrived, her eyes scanning me for injuries she could see and probably imagining worse ones she couldn't. Are you really okay? She demanded. They said you were kidnapped, that Tae-hyun had to rescue you, that people died. I'm okay, I promised, hugging her tight. Scared and bruised, but safe now. Tae-hyun found me. She pulled back, studying my face with the intensity only a younger sister could manage. And you still want to marry him? Even after everything that happened? After seeing what his world is really like? I took her hands, needing her to understand. Luna, I spent 5 years trying to protect you alone, carrying all the weight of keeping us afloat and safe. I was exhausted and scared every single day. Tae-hyun makes me feel like I don't have to do it alone anymore. Yes, his world is dangerous. Yes, what happened was terrifying. But he moved heaven and earth to get me back, and I trust him to keep both of us safe in a way I could never do by myself. Luna bit her lip, then glanced over at where Tae-hyun stood talking to his brothers, his posture relaxed in a way it rarely was outside family. He really loves you, she said quietly. I can see it in how he looks at you. I really love him too, I confirmed. She sighed dramatically, but smiled. Okay then. I guess I'm gaining a scary but devoted brother-in-law. Just promise me one thing. Promise you'll be happy. I promise, I said, and meant it with everything in me. The celebration was warm and chaotic, multiple generations of Parks mixing with a few trusted family friends. Mrs. Park kept refilling my plate despite my protests, and Min Jae toasted us with too much soju and heartfelt words about his brother finally finding peace. Tae-hyun stayed close to me throughout the evening, his hand always finding mine, like he needed the physical contact to confirm I was real and safe. Later that night, back at the penthouse, we lay tangled together in his bed and talked about the future in concrete terms for the first time. I'm starting therapy next week, he said quietly. Real therapy with a specialist in combat PTSD. I've been avoiding it because I was afraid of what I'd have to face, but after almost losing you, I realized I want to be whole for you. Not just surviving, but actually healing. I'm proud of you, I told him honestly, running my fingers through his hair. That takes real courage. Will you come with me sometimes? He asked. Not to every session, but maybe some? I think having you there for the hard conversations would help. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my forehead. I want to reduce my role in the family business too, he said. Not immediately, but over the next few years. My father's been building legitimate companies, security consulting, and import-export that's actually legal. I want to transition into running those instead of the criminal operations. What would that mean for us? I asked. It means eventually we could have a normal life, he said. Or as normal as possible given my family. A house in a good neighborhood, kids if you want them, Sunday dinners with my parents that don't involve discussing criminal enterprises. A future I can be proud to give you. I kissed him softly. I want that, I said. All of it. With you. The wedding planning consumed the next 3 months. Mrs. Park took charge with the enthusiasm of a woman who'd been waiting years for one of her sons to settle down, and I discovered that Korean weddings involved significantly more ceremony and tradition than I'd anticipated. We compromised, blending elements from both cultures into something that felt uniquely ours. Luna threw herself into helping with preparations, bonding with Mrs. Park over flower arrangements and seating charts. Watching my sister laugh with my future mother-in-law, seeing her relaxed and happy for the first time since our parents died, made everything we'd been through worthwhile. The wedding took place on a perfect June evening at a venue overlooking Lake Washington. The ceremony itself was a mixture of Korean and American traditions, officiated by a friend of Mr. Park's who managed to make the proceedings both solemn and joyful. I wore a traditional white dress for the American ceremony, then changed into a gorgeous hanbok for the Korean portion, the silk soft against my skin and the colors vibrant. Tae-hyun looked devastating in his tuxedo, but when I appeared in the hanbok his eyes went suspiciously bright. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered when I reached him. The vows we'd written ourselves were simple and heartfelt. I promised to be his safe place, to see all of him and love every part, to stand beside him through darkness and light. He promised to protect and cherish me, to be worthy of the faith I'd placed in him, to build a life together that honored both our pasts and our future. When he kissed me as his wife, his hands gentle on my face and his eyes bright with unshed tears, I felt complete in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The reception was exactly the chaotic, joyful celebration Mrs. Park had envisioned, with too much food and dancing and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilarious. Min Jae's speech included the story of how his terrifying brother had been transformed by a waitress's kindness, making half the room laugh and the other half cry. Luna's toast was short but fierce, threatening Tae-hyun with violence if he ever made me cry, and then admitting he'd already proven himself by making me happier than she'd seen me in years. We danced until late, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating not just our marriage but the journey that had brought us to this moment. Every time I caught Tae-hyun's eye across the room, he smiled at me with such open adoration that my heart felt too full for my chest. That night, in a hotel suite overlooking the water, he made love to me with reverent slowness, whispering promises against my skin in English and Korean, showing me with every touch how precious I was to him. We fell asleep tangled together, husband and wife, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. 18 months later, life had settled into something beautifully ordinary. Tae-hyun had officially transitioned to running Park Security Consulting, a legitimate business that provided executive protection and security consulting to corporations and high-net-worth individuals. He still used his military training, but now it kept people safe through prevention rather than violence. The nightmares came less frequently, managed through therapy and medication and the safety of our home together. I'd gone back to school part-time, pursuing a degree in social work with a focus on trauma counseling. The foundation Mrs. Park helped me establish provided services to veteran families struggling with PTSD and reintegration, turning my experience into something that could help others. I still worked occasional shifts at Marcello's, unwilling to completely leave the place that had brought Tae-hyun and me together, but it was a choice now rather than a necessity. We'd bought a house in Queen and, close enough to his parents for regular family dinners, but far enough for privacy. Luna was thriving at the University of Washington, her tuition paid in full by her overprotective brother-in-law who'd adopted her as his own sister to protect. On a Thursday evening in November, Almost exactly 2 years after that first night at Marcelo's, I stood in our bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test with my heart racing. We'd been trying for 3 months, hopeful but not expecting it to happen so quickly. I'd planned an elaborate reveal, something romantic and memorable, but when Taehyun walked in from work and saw my face, all my plans evaporated. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, crossing to me with concern written across his features. I held up the test wordlessly, watching his expression shift from worry to confusion to dawning wonder. "You're pregnant?" he breathed, taking the test from my shaking hands to examine it like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "We're going to have a baby?" "We're going to have a baby," I confirmed, and then I was in his arms, both of us laughing and crying and holding each other like the precious miracle this was. He dropped to his knees, pressing his face against my still flat stomach, his hands spanning my waist with heartbreaking gentleness. "Hi, baby," he whispered. "I'm your dad, and I already love you more than anything. Your mom and I can't wait to meet you." Watching him talk to our unborn child, this dangerous, beautiful man who'd become the gentlest version of himself with me, I fell in love with him all over again. 6 months into the pregnancy, on another Thursday evening, we returned to Marcelo's for dinner. Marco greeted us with genuine warmth, commenting on how good it was to see us happy and settled. Jessica, still working there, squealed over my obvious baby bump and insisted on taking photos. We sat at the same table where Taehyun had first returned to see me after that chaotic night. The private dining room where his PTSD episode had happened was visible through the doorway, and I caught him looking at it with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking?" I asked softly. He took my hand across the table, threaded our fingers together. "I'm thinking about how that night was the worst moment of my life up to that point. Losing control, scaring everyone including myself, certain I was too broken to ever be normal again. And now it's the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought you into my life." I squeezed his hand, remembering my own fear that night, the decision to approach instead of retreat. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't helped you? If I just stayed back like everyone else?" "Every day," he said honestly. "And every day, I'm grateful you didn't. You saved me that night, Hannah, not just from the panic attack, but from the life I was living. You gave me a reason to heal, to be better, to want a future instead of just surviving the present. You saved me too," I reminded him. I was drowning in responsibility and fear, convinced I had to handle everything alone. "You showed me it was okay to accept help, to trust someone, to build a life that was about more than just surviving." He stood and came around the table, pulling me to my feet and into his arms despite my protesting laugh about my awkward pregnant belly. "I love you," he said firmly. "I love you and our baby and the life we're building. Thank you for taking a chance on a broken man in a restaurant 2 years ago." "Thank you for being worth the chance," I replied. Marco brought our food with a knowing smile, and we ate and talked about nursery colors and baby names and all the beautiful, ordinary concerns of expecting parents. The violence and danger that had marked our beginning felt like a distant memory, replaced by the quiet joy of a life built on love and trust and choosing each other every day. That night, lying in bed with Taehyun's hand resting protectively on my belly and our daughter kicking against his palm, I thought about fate and choice and the unexpected ways life changes. Some people might say we were doomed from the start, that violence and trauma were too heavy a foundation for lasting love. But I believed something different. I believed that sometimes kindness in a moment of crisis opens doors we didn't know existed. That broken people can find each other and become whole together. That choosing love despite fear and danger and uncertainty is the bravest thing we can do. And that the best futures are built not on perfection, but on two people committed to healing and growing and protecting what they've built together. So if you're watching this and wondering whether one moment of compassion can really change everything, whether taking a risk on someone damaged and dangerous could lead to happiness, I'm here to tell you it can. It did for me. That Thursday night at Marcelo's, when I walked toward a man everyone else walked away from, I found my future, my home, my family, and I wouldn't change a single moment of the chaos and fear and love that brought us here. Our daughter was born on a rainy April evening. 7 pounds of perfect, healthy baby who had her father's dark hair and my nose and a cry that could wake the entire hospital floor. Taehyun held her with such tender wonder, tears streaming down his face as he counted her tiny fingers and toes, that I fell in love with him all over again. We named her Grace, because grace was what we'd both been given when we needed it most. Grace to heal from our wounds. Grace to love despite our fears. Grace to build a future from the ashes of trauma and violence. And watching Taehyun rock our daughter to sleep that first night, singing softly in Korean while she settled against his chest, I knew that this was what all the pain and fear had been leading to. This moment of perfect peace. This family built on impossible love. This life that started with a simple choice to show compassion when it would have been easier to look away. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. One moment of kindness. One choice to see the human beneath the monster. One decision to trust that love might be worth the risk. For us, it was worth everything.